Gamshi Lakwan, which is Yankala Kalapuya for what's up. Shtayu, which is Choctaw for stay strong. Welcome to DiversiTV. I'm Mark Harris, your host, and I'll be introducing our guest, Maisy Davis, in a few minutes. DiversiTV, in case you are just tuning in for the first time, is a weekly interview show broadcast on Lane TV, where we explore topics around the rubric of diversity. If you are new to DiversiTV, welcome. If you are part of our growing legion of fans, welcome back. Our mission, and we choose to accept it, is to illuminate everyday diversity issues and give the mic and the camera to those who don't always get it. To that end, we each season, and we're in season 13, seasons roughly correspond to LCC terms. We've been doing this for a little over 4 years, have a little over 100 shows in the can, so to speak, that are broadcast, saturation broadcasts during breaks and over the summer. Today our topic will be a little bit more intense because we're talking about a thing that actually occurs fairly frequently and has to be dealt with, and we're not one to shy away from that which is intense. So I'm going to introduce, in the spirit of that, a motto for DiversiTV, and it comes from Isho, or Yeshua, as his mama called him. You know him by his Greek name, Jesus. This was kept edited out of the King James Version of the Bible, but those of us who are liberation theologists believe in going back to the African roots of Christianity and talking about it like we black folk do, chopping it up. So, in the Gospel of Thomas, Isho talks about, if you bring forth what is within you, that which is in you will save you. However, if you do not bring forth what is within you, that which is in you will destroy you. So we encourage self-expression, especially when we're sitting with and talking about the difficult. Now, part of, and this is Gospel of Thomas saying 70, I believe in the Saul Alinsky school. So those of you who are old enough to remember who Saul Alinsky was, he wrote a book called Rules for Radicals, which is not really about radicalism unless you understand where radicalism came from. Radicalism in this country simply meant that you acted in the cause of justice, even when and especially if it was popular. So Saul talked about the banality of evil. So continuing on from what Yeshua talked about, in Aramaic, the difference between good and evil is the difference between ripe and unripe fruit. Evil will ripen eventually and realize its seed potential. Good realizes it has all it needs to ripen and does so. It shines without putting others in the shade or without having to put other people down. Those you would characterize as evil want all of it for themselves and none of it for you. They are not ripe enough to know that they have it all already. So if you are thriving with little, they want you to have even less. And so what they'll try and do is actually keep that which you deserve and have earned from you. So if you achieve excellence, even with barriers like disabilities, discrimination, disabilities without accommodations, they still want you to fail. So in race relations, for example, this is why in white supremacy, that is, for example, like in chess, the game of chess, or what we refer to in strategizing in the cause of justice, justice chess, whites would rather see an intelligent, productive black person fail and leave a less intelligent or ignorant, stereotypically lazy black person in place to serve as an exemplar for the negative stereotype of the race. And that will basically prove their adage. You see, racism doesn't exist. These people are just simply stupid, inferior, and lazy. Racism is just an excuse. They're just playing the race card. Thus, as an example, and this is a real world example that I actually just talked with this person on the phone before coming to do the show. So if I seem a bit on edge, it's just because I've had my nose rubbed in this stuff today. When a honest, hardworking, clean and sober black employee supervising, lazy, thieving, they're thieving because they're drug addicts and their superiors know they are drug addicts, and they're stealing state-owned property with the full knowledge of their supervisors. So they're being supervised by this particular person who's clean and sober and African American. So thieving, drug-addicted white employees he attempts to discipline those employees into being productive. The black employee is operating at a disadvantage because of the phenomenon we know as white privilege. So especially when he simply uses the job description, he's actually asking them to do their job, to perform, while on state payroll. And they basically use racial epithets against him illegally, and they are not disciplined. So he receives racial threats by the people that are reporting to him in defiance of his lawful request for them to do their duty. And then he is disciplined, not them. So, the banality of evil. The unripe fruit accuses the ripe fruit of being evil simply by existing. The ripe fruit simply absorbs water and sunlight and grows. In just as chess, one develops one game slowly by absorbing one's mistakes and one's opponent's mistakes and moving on. So in an atmosphere of privilege, the privileged assume they have an advantage, and that advantage will hold true even over your hard work. If you're not aware of the game, they are right. If you are aware of the game and work smarter as well as harder, you can prevail. As Saul pointed out, evil is banal and essentially stupid, but don't count on evil remaining stupid, and don't even be surprised when evil is fiendishly clever. Now, when we study, and tonight's guest has been a student at LCC and has moved on to further her academic career, so she's seen this before. And some of you long-term watchers of DiversiTV have seen this before, but for those of you who are just tuning in, discrimination along perceivable human characteristics, I and Remy Caroline came up with this acronym CRASH. That is classism, racism, religion and spirituality, addiction, ability, age, sexism, and heterosexism. So they're essentially interlocking, interacting systems of oppression, called by some, if you talk to Bell Hooks, she calls it white supremacist capitalist patriarchy. If you talk to Alan Johnson, he refers to it as the matrix of domination. It's essentially the same thing. Systems of discrimination based on perceivable human characteristics. Now, if you happen to belong, you can check multiple boxes. So, for example, to use an extreme example, if you are a poor, blind, black, Muslim, lesbian, recovering alcoholic, then it is in a wheelchair. It's conceivable that you could be affected all of the elements of CRASH, but we're not actually playing oppression Olympics. Just to make the point that people can have multiple characteristics and be discriminated against by pattern systems. So within 6 types of isms, and these isms came mostly out of the literature around racism, but they can be applied to all of the characteristics within CRASH. There's 6 types of ism. I'm just going to identify 3. So type 1 is verbal or physical assault. If they call you nigger or the N-word, or they beat you up because of your characteristics or threaten to assault you. Type 2, mostly nonverbal, but they are also mostly nonverbal microaggressions, but sometimes microaggressions can be verbal. So the first 2, type 1 and type 2, are interpersonal, that is between individuals and groups of individuals. The next 4 take place through collective action in institutions. So for example, type 3 is unconscious institutionalism, racism, for example. And it occurs when the institution is unaware that individuals within it carry out type 1 and type 2 and take no action against it. So Daryl Wing Sue, who is actually a graduate of the University of Oregon where we're recording this, actually expanded upon some work of black psychiatrist Chester Pierce, among others, who originally coined the term microaggressions. And Dr. Sue has written an excellent book, excellent paper that's available on the net that I'm going to be quoting from a little bit. But 6 basic assumptions underlying microaggressions. 1, if one looks at the history of the United States, you'll see that all of us have been socialized into a society which there exists individual, institutional, and societal biases associated with race, gender, sexual orientation, and the other crash characteristics. Research indicates that none of us are immune from inheriting the biases of our ancestors, institutions, and society, particularly if we speak the English language, which is laden with them. So it's not the old-fashioned, for example, name-calling, lynching, etc., or bigotry that is most harmful in marginalized groups, but the contemporary forms known as microaggressions, or the insults, slights, and invalidation that people are subject to in everyday situations that do the most harm. So it's not like you're going to be lynched, but it is going to be likely that you will experience these microaggressions if you fit the characteristics, and these are often the most damaging, as they point out. So microaggressions are invisible, unintentional, and subtle in nature, and usually outside the level of conscious awareness, but they can be consciously inflicted. These unintentional and subtle microaggressions create and diminish one's culture, race, etc., creating hostile and invalidating environments. Microaggressions create psychological dilemmas for the perpetrator and recipient because it represents a clash of racial, gender, and sexual orientation, disability, and other realities. Microaggressions create hostile and invalidating climates for people of color, etc., and sap their spiritual and psychic energies. Microaggressives are accumulative in nature and can result in psychological symptoms such as depression, frustration, anger, rage, loss of self-esteem, and anxiety. So typically when he talks about, for example, microaggressions in therapy, he's actually broken them out in terms of species of microaggressions, like first, alien in your own homeland, people asking you where are you from when you're an American citizen if you're non-white. You're not a real American, you're not qualified. Ascription of intelligence, assigning or being surprised at intelligence because of your characteristic. Oh, you speak so well. You're so articulate. Color blindness. Oh, I'm not really racist. I'm discriminated against too. Race and culture do not really affect people's lives. You're making excuses, playing the race card. Criminality, assumption of criminal status. This particular quote happened to me. When were you arrested? I was arrested once when I was 17. The police officer said, 17 arrests? No. I was arrested once when I was 17. What was that for, theft? Now, I have a master's degree and was arrested once when I was 17 for pot with a car full of white kids with LAPD. That was fun. Denial of individual racism. Your racial oppression is no different than my gender or class oppression. Myth of meritocracy. You need to work hard. If you don't succeed, it's your own individual fault. Pathologizing cultural values, communication styles. Oh, you have borderline personality disorder when you're loud, emotional, and confrontational. You have social anxiety disorder when you avoid contact, which many cultures do not feel that direct eye contact is insulting or disrespectful. Second-class status, so the level of welcome or white preference is shown. And environmental invalidation. So building names, pictures, staffing reflect that you don't belong, you're not welcome, only white people can succeed, you are an outsider. So I'm going to actually skip through the skill building pieces because we're not doing therapy on television. And our guest tonight is Maisie Davis, who has an associate degree in arts and sciences from Lane Community College in Human Services. She has a bachelor's in education from the U of O, is a qualified mental health associate, and is currently a graduate student at Portland State University School of Social Work. Welcome, Maisie.
Thank you.
Sorry for that long introduction, but had to do setup.
I understand that.
Had a lot to get off my chest. And we have been through a long road. So, where are you from?
I'm from Oregon. I have been in Oregon my whole life. I have lived here for
A native Oregonian?
27 years.
Okay, all right. Okay.
And I like it. It's the rain.
All right. It's the rain, huh? It's the climate.
Mm-hmm.
So are you as what we referred to in LCC, a first generation or second generation college student?
I'm a second generation college student.
Okay. So your parents have college
Yes.
degrees. Okay.
Yes.
So how long have you lived in Lane County? You were born in Portland and raised in Cottage Grove.
Yes.
What was that like growing up? Because that is, I've not experienced that as a friendly place for people with our excellent suntan.
Yeah. Well, I agree. It wasn't a very friendly place for people who are different, especially if I, as a person of color, experienced being disabled, and I do have a speech impediment, and so that just kind of compounds the differences.
Okay, yeah. What made you decide to pursue the academic career you did and the academic path you did?
Well, as he said, I am in the human services field, and what really drove me to serve people is because there are people who don't have voices in this world. People who feel as if they don't have the experience or the education to speak up for themselves. And I want to help those people, those who cannot speak
For themselves.
for themselves, like
Yeah.
children.
Yeah. Children and others.
Yes.
Yeah. So what experiences of marginalization did you encounter or have you encountered in your academic career so far?
I've encountered a lot. It has been a really tough area because I was raised by a Caucasian family, and so I wasn't prepared for the marginalization that I have experienced. I've been physically attacked, verbally attacked, mentally attacked, so it's affected every area of my life.
Yeah. One of the things, in the interest of full disclosure, because technically we're not the press, but where we met at LCC in my ethnic studies classes. So was I the first black teacher you ever had in your academic career?
Yes.
Which is a lot of people's experience, right? And so that was in the African American experience class, which, you know, we basically talked about those isms and that whole construct of crash and type 1 through 6 isms and all that kind of stuff. And so one of the things that we often have dealt with within our Rites of Passage program, as an example, is the phenomenon of kids of color, black kids, or other ethnic minority kids being raised by Caucasian families, where the skill set or the awareness, because the type 1 through 6 basically, that came out of essentially black civil rights and black psychological literature, which is not taught necessarily in psych departments well, it isn't taught in the psych department at Lane Community College. I dare say that is not taught at the psych department here at the university. So where, even if your parents did have college degrees, they wouldn't necessarily know. There's no owner's manual, one, that comes with kids. And there's no section in the parenting, in parenting class, when you get your parenting license, on how do you deal with raising, I guess we can be blunt because you and I have been blunt. This is DiversiTV. We can do that. Raising a black child in racist Lane County. And how do you defend yourself against the assaults? Because that was part of the training that I got as an early age, by being raised by two black parents who were black professionals, who were also the conversations that I could see around the dinner table, as well as when they had their friends over who were other black professionals, how you deal with not only individual racism, but systemic racism. And the skill set that goes along with that. So being able to incorporate that in a class, and then say also to the white kids, because the majority of your classmates were white kids. Okay, it's not just about learning about African American history. It's also about, y'all need to see that this game is being run on you. What's being run on us for race is being run on you for the money. So for you to actually take that step, which I always have given you props about this, is huge, because you're giving you're not only empowering your own voice from within, but also trying to empower others. What are some of the things, I think we talked about this earlier, but, and I don't want to toot Lane's horn too loud, but I mean, because I experienced discrimination at Lane as a staff person, let alone people experiencing discrimination as part of their student career. Did you experience that at Lane, or where did you experience, so that's two questions. So did you experience, where did you experience discrimination in your academic career?
Well, so at LCC, I really didn't experience any type of discrimination. I heard about it, but it didn't personally affect me. But when I got to the University of Oregon, I experienced a great deal of racism, and as at Portland State right now. And so it's kind of interesting how at a smaller institution I was fine, and then at these big, huge institutions, it's fair game.
Yeah. Choose your own level of safety, of course, right? Because you talked about being physically attacked or verbally attacked or whatever. That happened here.
At the UVO, yes, it did.
Yeah. So academics don't necessarily go for the N-word, right? Students might, and students did, right? In terms of looking at not only support. What kind of, when you reported that, you reported that to the authorities? What do you feel happened?
Nothing really did happen. I told everybody I could about what happened at the U of O, especially on this campus. And it wasn't really their help that I got. I had to really toot my own horn and talk about everything over and over again, because I feel that I was ignored. I felt the situation that occurred, it was just people trying to say, oh, it just happens, and just get over it. And it's not that easy. I'll tell you that right now.
Right.
And so
let it roll off your back is a famous phrase.
Yeah, essentially.
Right.
And so I really didn't get any help, unfortunately.
Yeah. So okay, so as an example then, because you're going to have to say this to a client as you know that, because you are a qualified mental health professional in a profession that doesn't necessarily recognize that racism exists.
True.
But you know differently.
Yes.
So what kind of resources, besides the inner resources, and you can enumerate those if you want, did you fall back on?
Teachers. Being in school for so long really heightened who I felt I could trust and talk to about things going on. And
you were in the School of Ed at the time.
Yes. And I was really, really lucky to have instructors who were behind me 100%. And that really helped because it showed that these people were willing to go out there for me and whatnot.
Okay.
And also you. I'll to your horn for a second. You really helped me through that whole experience and really helped me see how to deal with this on an emotional level and on a mental level and on a physical level. And so it's just instructors who have really helped me through all this.
I have to say, because, coming out of this afternoon, I mean, it was really lucky. We had actually scheduled, meeting today, so it didn't even really occur to have you on the show till today. But it's been a really intense last couple of weeks for this subject, because it's not only you, but other folks at Lane and other folks in the community, and we have a gang problem, and it's black kids that are the gang problem. Like, okay, what about the Klansmen and the skinheads?
True.
Y'all ain't focusing on them.
Yeah.
Okay, especially when they surround our folks on campus, and so right. What's the official response? Just to have good teachers that can talk with people? Well, I hope we have them, but
I hope so too.
That isn't, sometimes we're kind of left to our own devices.
Yep.
So what are some of the inner resources that you've identified for yourself that other people could talk to and develop?
I think people would speak to. I'm a really strong person, and I'm strong because I've been through it. I have had to go through hell, essentially, to fight for me. And so I think strength is a really big thing. And also just being conscious of how I think about what's going on, because I have gotten into the mindset of, well, everybody's bad, etc. But then I think about but there have been people who have helped me and stuff, and so it's about learning to differentiate from everybody and just those people who affected me.
Yeah. Good fruit, bad fruit.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Rotten fruit. Overripe.
Yeah.
Compost.
Which ones I'm going to eat first? Yeah.
Right. And what's healthy? Because one of the things, you asked me this, so I'm going to, if you don't mind me, sharing that conversation.
That's fine.
So, when Isho talked about the difference between good fruit and ripe fruit, and the word falls on fertile ground, sometimes it falls on rocks. Well, how do you deal with the barriers, you asked, right? And so part of that, and the image that I use is, okay, the dandelion that's growing through the concrete, it has to be slow. It has to get the nutrients from wherever it gets the nutrients, but when it sends out roots into a barrier, it slowly crumbles the barrier. But it has to stay in touch with the roots that make it strong. And that's part of the piece. So whether you have like a mentor, whether you have, or mentors, you know, diversifying people who've done what you want to do and have gone through what you want to go through. Well, actually, we don't want to go through what we want to go through, but we're often targets. And I think in one of the things we talked about this morning was that strength. I mean, you do have a lot of strength. And even when others without disabilities would crumble, and actually you've seen them crumble, and you have not, it makes me wonder in terms of, wow, the Spirit has given you these gifts that other people see as, oh, well, it's a disability. Well, no, it's a strength, right? Because you've been able to articulate that. And that's one of the pieces that I think in terms of bringing out what's within you. You have a lot of wisdom, you have a lot of strength. And be able to talk about that and affirm that, and get with people that can affirm that as well. Well, because you're black and female, you recognize systemic barriers along with individuals within systems. Can you talk about your experience with allies and adversaries? What have you learned from your allies? What have you learned from your adversaries?
Well, let's start with adversaries, because
good choice.
They're my best friends. I'll just say it. It's people who don't like me. That's okay. You don't like me, but at least you're still thinking about me.
And you keep thinking about me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I've had a lot of people come up against me in my 27 years, and what I have really learned is don't trust a lot of people. Because if you trust the people who are out to eat you, they're going to eat you. And I have also learned that don't give away your position. You don't tell them.
You mean like your strategy, where you are?
Both.
Yeah, okay.
All of that stuff.
Okay.
Where you are, like how you're thinking to approach it, etc. Because once they know where you are and what you're doing, they'll come and get you.
They can't get your goat if they don't know where your goat is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you're in darkness, they don't know where you're going.
As long as you can see in darkness, it's okay.
Exactly. So what's most important?
Ninja style.
Yes, ninja. And also to just stand strong. And I say that, and it's really hard, but if people are coming up against you, what happens if you play dead, essentially? You're going to die because you're playing dead. But if you still stand up, even if there isn't anyone around you, it means that you're still standing and you're still willing to fight. And for my adversaries, thank you for having me learn that, because I'm a better person for it.
Gratitude for the opponent. That's good, because you'd only get stronger with strong opponents.
Yep, true.
So your allies. How can somebody be an ally? Because, I mean, one of the things you just talked about, I mean, just in the image, so I can actually even see an evolution even from this morning. Right? I mean, you're standing up even when people want to knock you down. You know, other people have fallen or caved. You don't give your position away. You don't give your operational strategy away. I mean, because that's what your adversary wants, right? And so standing up against injustice means that there's a sign of life. Even if they knock you down, you're still wanting to get up. Other people who lay down are dead, essentially. So that's what you've learned from people you thought were allies, but
turn out to be adversaries,
right?
exactly.
Right. So what about what makes a good ally?
That's an interesting question, because I've seen different people help in different ways. And I think something that makes a person a really good ally is trust. Because if a person doesn't believe you, you can't trust them because they don't believe you.
Right.
And so just trust. Just find people who you trust with all your soul, soul. People who would never think to talk about you badly or whatnot. Also, what makes a good ally is someone who's been there. A person who understands the struggle that you're going through. Because if I didn't have people who understood to some extent the struggle I'm going through, how do they understand me and how I deal with something? And that's really hard.
Yeah, right.
And something that's really, really key about people and trying to be an ally is collaboration. Because if a person isn't willing to put themselves out there, you aren't getting out there. You're just staying where you are, and then you'll become complacent in what is going on, and then it leaves you more open to the attack.
Right. That's a great piece of strategy. Hope you all picked up on that. Okay? Because the ally piece is really key in terms of looking at, all right, how can you be an ally, and how can you be, sometimes the adversaries are part of what make you strong, right? And being able to succeed even when barriers are placed in your path, because, part of the reason I identified, one of the things that we've been talking about, especially in the class that you took that today was the last class. So we identify, part of Afrocentric psychology is we identify the barriers and we train people for them. We don't pretend they don't exist. Yeah. Okay? More barriers, the greater the strength. All right? So you may have a speech impediment, but you don't have a thought impediment because you correctly assess and strategize, and it comes out in your writing, and I hope this becomes a chapter in your book. I know you didn't even think about it having a book yet. Maybe you have. Okay, well, think about your book, right? Because you have a voice, right? And so that's one of the pieces in terms of dealing with the microaggression. So what Sue talked about, Sue talks about, is microaggressions are not necessarily nonverbal. Sometimes they are verbal. Sometimes the number 2, ascription of intelligence. Oh, well, you have a speech impediment. That means you must have a brain impediment, so you couldn't have produced a piece of writing like this, right? That's often the assumption. But, having seen your writing over the years and how you speak and how you, spoken publicly too, there's a great power there. So being able to affirm that and affirm that for others. As a person in the academy, looking for barriers, because it's my job to train people for the barriers, but also to remove the barriers that exist. What would you say to your adversarial instructors?
That's a loaded question.
It is, but I'm not thinking about anybody in particular, right?
I understand.
Because as a piece of strategy, right?
Yep.
I'm thinking about it in general, because this is torn from the headlines. So at Lane, we've been trying to have mandatory cultural competency training. Okay? At PSU, theoretically, they do have mandatory cultural competency training. And it has been mandated for a number of years. Lane, we're resisting that, particularly the faculty are resisting that, right? in the newspaper about a week and a half ago, a bill requiring cultural competency training was voted down. Right? So it might be a while before we have mandatory cultural competency training for university professors. But what do you think an important component of that would look like? Say, for example, a culture of disability, just to take one of your characteristics.
Well, I may be brave in saying this, but to my adversaries, I would tell them, bring it on. Because if I don't go through it, I won't get stronger. And to go through it means I can help another person deal with the exact same thing and be able to affirm their strengths and whatnot. And so it's a good lesson in how to teach somebody else.
Yeah. Are you saying make it harder for you?
It's been hard, and it's gonna get harder.
Been hard. How could it be harder? Right.
It's gonna be, like, it's bound to get harder. I don't think I've seen the worst of worst yet.
Yeah.
It may feel like it, but I don't think I've seen it yet.
Unfortunately, you're probably right. I mean, I'm going to give a shout out to Dr. Cara DeMarco, who, we had brainstormed earlier about many a situation being faced by students. And she said, look, graduate school is oppressive. It's to screen you out. Okay? It's not to include everybody. It's to screen you out. And barriers are often put not because of academic rigor, okay? Because some people, they drop the barriers for, and they tend to be the, I'm going to not censor myself, okay? It tends to be people like the Charlie Sheens and the Lindsay Lohans and the Britney Spears that the barriers are lowered for, as you've experienced already, than people that look like us, or in particular you. So at least, if they're going to be barriers that everybody has to face, hurdles, let the hurdles be the same size and in the same area.
Exactly.
Because as academics, basically one of the things that I talk about with, my students and black students in particular is, that old school thing about, okay, we have to be twice as good to be considered equal. Now that doesn't necessarily mean you have to throw twice as much stuff at us, but we already know that you will, and we will still succeed. What happens when you're in the classroom as an instructor? Can you think forward to that?
What would happen is I would really encourage the students I have to be open and honest with me, knowing that I've been there through most of it, and that to be open and honest isn't a bad thing, and to be open and honest should be seen as a strength instead of a weakness. And also, to be an instructor says you have a lot of power to do what you want with. And something that I've said is that I will not abuse that power. And I will identify the prejudices I have and the biases I have and correctly deal with them. Because if people don't deal with their biases, it it can create a hard experience for other people.
Yeah.
And I would really strive to have an open and welcoming environment, because that's what I want.
So what's the end game with you're going to get an MSW?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
Maybe even a doctorate at some point.
Yes.
So in addition to classroom duties, you're going to be a therapist?
Yes.
Who are you going to specialize in?
Juveniles. Those with behavioral problems. Because they don't have a voice in this world yet.
Yeah. And you could give them one, or assist them to find.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So what do you think would assist them in moving past the barriers that are placed in their path?
Learning to how to jump over them. And that's the hardest part, because that's where you talked about having tools and a toolbox of all these tools to help in certain types of situations. And if people don't have those tools, they can't properly fight for themselves. Tools is a big thing that helps me, and I think that I would want to help others find is more tools, because if I didn't have tools, I don't know where I would be.
Yeah.
And something also I'm trying to impart is that you have to know who you are, because knowing who you are helps you identify the barriers and how to jump over them, or to go around them, or through them, or whatnot.
Yeah. As we were talking about earlier today, in terms of explaining the difference between a system and systematic. So if a wall is part of a system, and it's a barrier, okay, is the barrier the height? Is the barrier the thickness? Okay, if you talked about tools in a toolbox, do you have like a jackhammer? Do you have like a chisel? Well, there might be something, I mean, the wall might be there for a purpose, so destroying it might not be fruitful or possible. Is there a door? Do you have a key to the door? Right, that's part of the systematic part. The system is noticing that there's a structure there. Systematic is how you open those barriers. So even conceptualizing it like that, giving people the tools. So, okay, so high enough wall, I need a ladder. If there's alligators in the moat, can I swim? Did I bring enough stakes for the alligators? That kind of thing. So what assists you internally in performing despite the barriers? Can you talk about the spiritual qualities?
What has really helped me is that I think back to all of the African American people who have fought for different things and thinking that if I don't fight for anything, then what am I doing here?
Right.
I'm just a waste of space if I'm not trying to help other people or help who I am.
So that sense of purpose, future, okay, in yourself,
Yes.
but also a sense of history
Yep.
going back. So that means, you talked about the history of African Americans, which means even if you were raised by white parents, they have to know that history.
Yep.
That has to be in your childhood books. That has to be in your library, or give you a library card. Because that's part of the piece that is missing in terms of like curriculum in schools and also with parents. What skills do you recognize in assisting you through the barriers?
Skills. To be quiet when I need to be. I'm a very loud person, but I have found that there are times to be quiet, to kind of to kind of get past the enemy silently without them spotting you.
That is so deep. Yeah, right. Because silence is not a thing Americans learn very well.
No, not at all. And that's been really hard.
Silence and also invisibility,
Yes.
which would be tricky.
Exactly.
Because if you're a raisin in a sea of buttermilk, it's difficult to be invisible
Yep,
to the
exactly.
buttermilk.
Yep. And also just to be really, really conscious of what's going on around you. Because to be unconscious to everything happening means that you're more vulnerable to attacks.
Yeah.
And to be conscious at least means that you can see the attack coming.
Yeah. So part of it isn't, it must be said, right? Because I can see, people watching this thinking, oh, well, it's all negative. No, there's strength. So you have to do good self-care.
Yes.
You have to be relaxed, because the best way to basically deal with, if you are in a situation where you're constantly under attack, you've got to be relaxed and do good self-care, not get stressed out, because that's what the microaggressions do to us.
Yes, exactly.
How did you develop your writing voice?
I'm not really sure. I think it just kind of happened after being in school for a couple of years. Something that I want to impart in having the writing voice I have is strength, because to have that passion for things I'm doing. And also just really embracing who I am and not denying how I talk or how I write, and just kind of embracing all of it.
Yeah. Because seeing several pieces of writing, it's like, whoa, okay, this stuff is deep. The analysis is incisive. It's like, it's able to flow, and it's able to flow in a way that is just so powerful especially when it gets like academic. I like a good piece of nerd. You do good nerd.
Thank you.
But you also do good passionate poet too, so to see both of those. So how many different writing voices have you identified within yourself?
Two or three right now.
Okay.
I have poet Maisy, who is a poet who I love having things work and stuff, and then I have this academic Maisy who I feel I have to do certain standards and do certain things, and that's really challenging in itself. And then I have just Maisy, who it could really sound all weird and it doesn't make sense, but that's just how I write, and that's just how I bring it forth. And then do I choose to put it over to poetry Maisy or academic Maisy?
Yeah. So there's an editor Maisy in that too.
Yep.
I want to thank you for coming.
Welcome.
Because just in that last, it's all been great. But just in that last piece, in terms of having young people find their voice, like you and I were at Lauryn Hill, and that was a bit of a disappointment because she has a great voice, and I wish she'd make it come out because I'd like to hear what she has to say. But I mean, you have a voice even more powerful than hers, right? And so to identify that voice and to bring that out is a really beautiful thing.
Thank you.
And I'm honored to know you.
Likewise.
If you like what you've seen, email us at liveclass@lanecc.edu. Put DiversiTV in the subject line. Tell us what you liked. Tell a friend. And suggest future shows and topics if you want to do that. Until then, sta you, which means stay strong.